Hello and welcome back, my lovely Lovecraftians, to another tale by H.P. Lovecraft, this time titled Polaris. Into the north window of my chamber glows the pole star with uncanny light. Although the long, hellish hours of blackness it shines there, and in the autumn of the year, when the winds from the north curse and whine, and the red leaves trees of the swamp mutter things to one another, in the small hours of the morning, under the horned waning moon, I sit by the casement and watch that star. Down from the heights rails the glittering Cassiopeia as the hours wear on, while Charles Wayne lumbers up from behind the vapor smoke swamp trees that sway in the night wind. Just before dawn, Arcticus winks rudely from above the cemetery on the low hillock, and Coma Berenice shimmers weirdly after off in the mysterious east. But still, the pole star leers down from the same place in the black vault, winking hideously like an insane watching eye that strives to convey some strange message, yet recalls nothing, save that it once had a message to convey. Sometimes, when it is cloudy, I can sleep. Well, do I remember the night of the great aurora, when over the swamp lay the shocking coruscations of the day moonlight. After the beams came clouds, and then I slept, and it was under a horn-winning moon that I saw the city for the first time. Still and solemn did it lie on a strange plateau, in a hollow betwixt strange peaks of ghastly marble, where its walls and its towers, its columns and its domes and pavements, in the marble streets were marble pillars, the upper parts of which were carven in the images of grave, bearded men. The air was warm and stirred not, and overhead, scarce 10 degrees from the zenith, glowed that watching pole star. Long did I gaze on the city, but the day came not, when the red albemarle, which blinked low in the sky but never set, had crawled a quarter of the way around the horizon. I saw light and motion in the houses and the streets, forms strangely robed, but at once noble and familiar, walked abroad and under the horned waning moon. Men talked wisdom in a tongue which I understood, though it was unlike any language I had ever known. And when the red alberdomes had crawled more than halfway around the horizon, there were again darkness and silence. When I awake, I was not as I had been. Upon my memory was graven with the visions of the city, and within my soul had arisen another and vaguer recollection, of whose nature I was not certain. Thereafter, on cloudy nights when I could sleep, I saw the city often, sometimes under that horn-waning moon, and sometimes under that hot yellow rays of sun which did not set, but which wheeled low around the horizon, and on the clear nights the pole star leered as never before. Gradually I came to wonder what might be my place in that city. Oh, the strange plateau betwixt strange peaks. At first, I was content to view the scene as an all-observant, uncorporeal presence. I now desired to define my relation to it, and to speak my mind amongst the grave men who conversed each day in the public squares. I said to myself, this is no dream. For by what means can I prove the greater reality of the other life in the house of stone and brick, south of the sinister swamp, and the cemetery on the low hillock, where the pole star peers into my north window each and every night? One night, as I listened to the discourse in the large square containing many statues, I felt a change and perceived that I had at last a bodily form. Nor was I a stranger to the streets of Olof, which speak and lies to the plateau of Syrinx, betwixt the northern Notum and the Catapulk. It was my friend Alois who spoke, and his speech was one of that pleased my soul, for it was a speech of true man and patriot. That night had the news come of Daucus' fall, and of the events of the intruders squat hellish yellow fiends who 5 years ago had appeared out of the unknown west to ravage the confines of our kingdom, and finally to besiege our towns. Having taken the fortified place at the foot of the mountains, their way now lay open to the plateau, unless every citizen who could resist their strength of 10 men. For the squat creatures were mighty in the arts of war, and knew not the scruples of honor which held back our tall, gray-eyed man of Lormor from the ruthless conquest. Alos, my friend, was commander of all the forces of the plateau, and in him lay the last hope of our country. On this the occasion he spoke of the perils to be faced, and exhorted the men of Alos, the bravest of the Lomarians, to sustain the traditions of their ancestors who had forced to move southward from Zolbana before the advance of the great ice sheet, even as our descendants must someday flee from the land of Lomar. Valiantly and victoriously swept aside the hairy, long-armed cannibal gauntlets that stood in their way. To me, Alice denied a warrior's part, for I was feeble and given to strange faintings when subject to stress and hardship. But my eyes, yes, were the keenest in the wisdom of the Zambarian fathers. So my friend desired not to do me of this incantation. No, my friend, who had been so variant, so valiant in his ways, yours, desiring me, rewarded me with a duty which was second to nothing in importance. To the watchtower of Sapience he sent me, there to serve as the eyes of our army. Should the Entus attempt to gain the citadel by the narrow pass between the peak of Norton, and thereby surprise the garrison, I was to give the signal of fire, which would warn the waiting soldiers and save the town from immediate disaster. Alone I mounted the tower, for every man of stout body was needed in the passes below. My brain was sore dazed with excitement and fatigue, for I had not slept in many days. Yet was my purpose firm, for I love my native land of Lomar, and the marbled city of Othla that lies betwixt the peaks of Norton and Cattyfunk. But as I stood in the tower's topmost chamber, I beheld the horn-waning moon, red and sinister, quivering through the vapors, and hovered over the distant valleys of Bannock. And though an opening in the roof glittered the pale pole star, fluttering, oh, so gallantly over, I knew it was almost as if it was alive and leering like a fiend in temperature. Methodots that spirit whispered evil counsels, soothing me to traitorous somnolence with a damnable rhythmic response, and a promise which it repeated over and over again. Slumber, watcher, till the spears 26,000 years have revolved, and I return to the spot where now I burn. Other stars anon shall rise to the axis of the skies. Stars that soothe, and stars that bless with a sweet forgetfulness. Only when my round is o'er shall the past disturb thy door. Vainly did I struggle with my drowsiness, seeking to connect these strange words with some lore of the skies, which I had learned from the Pennock manuscripts. My head, heavy and reeling, drooped to my breast, and when next I looked up, it was in a dream. With the pole star grinning at me through a window from over the horrible swaying trees of a dream swamp, and I am still dreaming in my shame and my despair. I sometimes scream frantically, begging the dream creature around me to waken me ere the Unto to steal up the pass behind the peak of Noton and take the citadel by surprise. But these creatures are daemons, for they laugh at me and tell me I am not dreaming. They mock me whilst I sleep, and whilst the squat yellow foe may be creeping silently upon us, I have failed in my duty and betrayed the marble city of Otho. I have proven false to Alos, my friend and commander, but still these shadows of my dreams deride me. They say there is no land of Lomar save in my nocturnal imaginings, that in those realms where the pole star shines high and red, Albertine Rem crawls low around the horizon. There has been naught save ice and snow for thousands of years, and never a man save squat yellow creatures, blighted by the cold, whom they call Esquimaux. And as I writhe in my agony, my guilty, guilty agony, frantic to save the city whose perils every moment grows, and vainly striving to shake off the unnatural dream of a house of stone and brick south of a sinister swamp, and a cemetery on a low hillock, the pole star, evil and monstrous, leers down from the black vault, winking hideously like an insane eye, watching, while strives to convey some strange message, yet recalls nothing save that it once had a message to convey. Such concludes the story of Polaris, written by H.P. Lovecraft. I adore the way that most of the stories have to deal with old civilizations. This reminds me a lot of other books that we've read on this channel. Old city, a dear friend, and an unimaginable horror just around the horizon. You can tell that there's parallels between the waking moments and the moments of rest that we get where things bleed into different realities. I believe our narrator is trapped within his own dream and his own haunting failure of distress, disappointment, and distraught. They have failed their dear friend Alos. Their waking moments are torment from creatures beyond our comprehension, and overall, it is so difficult to deal with the fact that this is history repeating itself. They've been pushed out of their land repetitively. They are scholars, not fighters. They were deemed unworthy by those around them, that he cannot pull the effort of modern man. No, say he is just brain, not brawn. And even then his brain failed him, as inevitably the comprehension of the unknown is ever so gnawing at our very souls. Overall, I would say that our narrator had a great demise come across the very skies of the light that shone upon him and the darkness that swallowed him. Be it that he may be a failure, or be it may that this is not even real. Neither way, he is tormented beyond our comprehension and cannot omit the mistakes that he has created. Now we will proceed to my take on Polaris. Overall, I just wanted to start doing this to explain how I see the story in depth. Polaris by H.P. Lovecraft to me is a story about dreams, memory, guilt, and the terrifying possibility that the life we believe is real may not actually be the real one at all. Similar to a story I highly recommend called The Reddit Lamp Story. If you haven't read it, I'll link it below. It's a very short story that deals with the same themes as this one. The story begins with an unnamed narrator starting out the north window of his room at the pole star, called Polaris. Every night the star seems to stare back at him. It does not simply shine, it watches, already feeding into his madness. The narrator describes it almost like a living eye suspended in the darkness, similar to the Eye of Sauron. No matter how the rest of the night sky changes, Polaris remains fixed in the place, glaring down at him as if it was judging him. For some reason, he feels that the star is trying to tell him something. The problem is that he cannot understand what. He only has the strange feeling that Polaris once carried some important message, but that message has somehow been forgotten, be it time, him, or a translation error. That gives us one of the story's first major ideas. Forgotten knowledge, something happened before, something he should remember, but he doesn't. And he has no way of even knowing if he knew it to begin with. On clear nights, the light of Polaris keeps him awake. Only when clouds cover the sky can he sleep. This feeds into his paranoia that the star is watching him. And even when he's finally asleep, he begins dreaming of another world. He sees a strange marble city sitting on a plateau between enormous mountain peaks. It is beautiful, ancient, and unfamiliar. Yet somehow it feels deeply familiar to him. He watched the people living there. They speak a language he has never learned, and yet he understands every word. The city is called Altho, and it belongs to an ancient land of Lomar. At first, our narrator observes everything, almost like a ghost. He can see the city, and he has no physical body. Night after night, through the dreams become stronger, more detailed, more convincing. But which life is his dream? Eventually, we begin to ask ourselves a dangerous question. Why does he automatically assume that his ordinary life is real and Altho is only a dream? When he is in Altho, it feels just as real as anything else, perhaps even more real. Then something changes. One night, he is no longer observing the city. He has a body there, he has friends, he has memories, and they belong to him and him alone. Most importantly, he believes that he belongs there, that this was promised to him, that this is his and his alone. This is where the story stops feeling like a normal dream narrative, and he is not simply imagining another world. He seems to be remembering a life that existed before the one he saw at the beginning. Now, overall, his closest friend, as we know, is Alos, commander of the military forces defending the plateau. Lomar is at war. A hostile people called the Intus have invaded the kingdom and are gradually destroying its cities. They have already captured important territory, and now although itself is in danger, the narrator desperately wanted to defend his homeland, but he is physically frail and suffers strange fainting spells whenever he becomes exhausted or overwhelmed. Because of this, his dear friend Alice refuses to send him directly into battle. Instead, he gives him other responsibilities. And in some ways, it may be even more important. The narrator has exceptionally sharp eyesight, so Alice assigns him to a watchtower overlooking a narrow mountain pass. His job is simple. Watch the pass, don't fall asleep. If the enemy tries to sneak through the mountains and attack the city from behind, he must light a signal fire. If he stays awake and performs his duty, the city may survive. If he fails, the city fails. So, he climbs the tower alone. He is exhausted and has not slept properly in days, and he is determined to remain awake because he loves Lomar and refuses to betray Alos. Then he looks up and he sees that same damnable star, Polaris. Polaris speaks, the same star that is shining over Lomar. Again, it seems alive. Again, it seems to be communicating with him, and only him. But this time, the narrator can almost understand what it's saying. The star tells him to sleep. It promises forgetfulness, and it speaks of enormous astronomical cycles, lasting roughly 26,000 years. The details matter. This is building a slow wobble of Earth's axis, the precision of equinoxes over immense periods of time. The star nearest to the North Celestial Pole changes. So when Polaris speaks of returning to the same place after thousands of years, the story becomes much larger than a nightmare. It suggests that the narrator's memories may be connected to an impossibly distant point in human history. But then he falls asleep. He can't resist it, and he understands what's at stake. But exhaustion overwhelms him. His head drops, his eyes droop over, and when he opens his eyes again, he is back in the house beside the swamp. The pole star shines through the window. The people around him insist this is the real world. They tell him that Lomar never existed. all is only a part of his dreams. According to them, the region he describes has been covered in ice and snow for thousands of years. No marble city, no kingdom, no army, no Alos, nothing. But the narrator refuses to believe. To him, the world in his dream is real. He believes that he's still asleep in the watchtower, while somewhere in the real world, the enemy is creeping through the mountain pass. Every second that passes, Aleph is closer to destruction. He screams at the people around him. He begs them to wake him. He tries desperately to return to the tower so he can light the warning fire. But nobody believes him. They laugh. They think he's insane. And we're left with one undoubtedly out of the ordinary certainty. He has failed. He fell asleep, he betrayed his city, he betrayed Alos, and because of him, the people he loved may have died. But what if he's right? This is where Polaris becomes much darker than a simple dream story. The horror is not necessarily that the narrator is insane. No, the horror is that he might be right. It's never completely implied if the reality is genuine. Maybe Aldo was only a dream created by an unstable mind. Maybe the narrator imagined an entire civilization and gave himself a role inside it to just pass the days. But the astronomical references complicate the explanation. The 26,000-year cycle raises the possibility of memory stretching across enormous periods of time. Perhaps our narrator is remembering a previous life. Perhaps Lamar truly existed in prehistoric Antarctica. Or perhaps his modern existence is the dream, and his conscience has somehow become trapped thousands of years away from the moment when he failed his people. At the end of the story, the people around him tell him that the frozen northern lands are inhabited only by people they call Eskimos. The narrator immediately associates them with the enemies who attacked Lamar. There are uncomfortable ideas that are portrayed, reflecting prejudiced presence in the Lovecraft era, and in Lovecraft's own worldview. But within the story structure, the important idea is that the fragments of the narrator's ancient world may still exist. The names have changed, the landscape has changed, the civilizations have vanished, but something survived, and perhaps his memory survived too. Polaris represents something. It's a symbol connecting both realities. The star exists in the narrator's modern room and exists in the Tower of Lamar. It appears unchanged, while entire civilizations rise, disappears, and became forgotten. For human beings, 26,000 years is almost impossible to comprehend. For a star, it is merely part of a cycle. That contrast is deeply Lovecraftian. It is cosmic horror in its finest definition. Human lives feel enormously important to us. Our homes, our countries, our friendships, our failures, and our successes. But against cosmic time, all of those things can disappear so completely that future generations do not even know they existed. Aldo may have once been the narrator's entire world. Now, nobody remembers it. Nobody except him, and perhaps the star, Polaris. The final horror that appeals to me is the psychological horror running through the story. The narrator is trapped between two realities, and there is no way for him to prove which one is real. Reality normal feels stable because we trust our own memories and senses. But if your memories, emotions, and senses all tell you another world is real, how could anyone convince you otherwise? The narrator remembers Alos. He remembers loving Lamar. He remembers his responsibility. Those emotions are completely genuine to him. So even if Lamar was technically only a dream, the guilt is still real. The ending returns us to the same image that opened the story. Polaris is shining through the darkness like an insane eye watching him. It appears to have a message, but that message remains just beyond understanding. The narrator has not escaped. He is still trapped beneath the star. Still remembering, still forgetting, still wondering whether he's awake or asleep. And somewhere, perhaps thousands of years in the past, he believes a city is waiting for a warning signal that will never come. That is what makes Polaris such an interesting, early Lovecraft story. The monsters are not really the point. The horror comes from time, memory, identity, and the possibility that the world around you may be only one thin layer of reality far older and stranger than you understand. And Polaris simply watches all of it, unmoving and patient, as civilization disappears completely beneath it. But these are just my takes and my concept of the story in a total form presented to you. Are your watchful eyes understanding the words that spell beneath the skies? Or do you have theories, comments, or questions to leave below, my dear scribes? Until next time, my lovely Lovecraftians, bye-bye.